So this is my topic. Hi, I'm Becca, and I will be looking at sex workers as commodities in Southeast Asian sex tourism. So my interest from this comes from a trip I took to Cambodia 4 years ago in the summer of 2011 with a volunteer group, and we took a short retreat on the beach in Sihanoukville. And we were sitting there on the beach admiring the beautiful scenery, and it was gorgeous, and then I looked to my right and I saw a 7-year-old Caucasian man sitting with 3 young Cambodian girls between the ages of about 8 and 10, caressing him. And we were very disturbed, but then looked around and noticed that this was not a unique occurrence. There were solo Western men all over these beaches, and I became familiar with this term, this phenomenon known as sex tourism. So sex tourism, as defined by the United States PROTECT Act, is the travel with intent to engage in illicit sexual conduct. And sex tourism has several popular hotspots in the world, including the Caribbean and some parts of Eastern Europe, but Southeast Asia is one of them. And this issue has caused serious harm, of course, to these parts of the world, between public health epidemics of sexually transmitted infections, as well as taking children out of schools to service these tourists, and just the general degradation of women in these cultures. So I will study the process by which people are commodified and treated as goods by Western consumers in Southeast Asian sex tourism by looking at the discourse and some policy, and study the specific phenomena that cause the travel of Western men to solicit these prostitutes in Southeast Asia. So my hypothesized power relationships that I expect to see are on the supply side, the vulnerability of poverty as one of the causes for this supply in Southeast Asia, as well as the corruption of government officials. And then on the demand side, the exploitation of cheap sex, a removal from the men's moral sphere, and kind of the benefits of being anonymous, sexism, paternalism, and racism as well. So my case selection, these are all coastal Southeast Asian countries with popular online forums talking about these as sex tourism locations known for exotic leisure. And so I will compare the policy as well as the online discourse regarding the supply of sex workers and the demand by sex tourists. So some background, these countries have all benefited from international tourism as a whole over the past several decades and really promoted it through propaganda. So one of this example is Thailand. In 1997, they declared it Visit Thailand Year, and in order to encourage international tourism, they have this beautiful Thailand campaign, and the slogan, there's an advertisement seen here. It says, "The one fruit of Thailand more delicious than the durian is its young women." So this was from the government of Thailand, and there was a lot of kind of promotion of tourism, brochures and websites, but all the pictures portray these beautiful women, and so the people really commodified by their own governments. These countries all have laws against prostitution, of solicitation of prostitutes or sex tourism, as well as being under international agreements, but fail to enforce them due to their economic benefits gained from the tourism. So this is a map I created of some sex tourist flows to Southeast Asia. You see these all are ending up in those 3 countries, but coming from the most frequent countries being the US, Australia, and some Western European countries, Germany, the UK, France. So this data came from a list of arrest records done by the Protection Project, and this is just an example to kind of illustrate for you. In June 2003, an American from Seattle, age 69, was arrested for having sexual conduct with 2 boys, aged 10 and 13. He paid them $2 each. Subsequent investigations show he may have abused as many as 50 children over the course of 5 years and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. So just to give a trigger warning for the next section, there's going to be some vulgar and explicit information regarding how men have perceived these women. But these are public legal websites that people are often surprised exist, but some titles of these websites: Sex Holiday Asia, International Sex Tours, International Sex Guide, Wiki Sex Guide, The Single Dude's Guide to Life and Travel. These are either forums kind of selling sex tourism guidebooks or individual men's blogs describing their own experiences. And this is where I got a lot of my information about what is being said about these women. So this is some of the discourse about the supply. So on the supply side, some examples I found were just the cheap sex, and it's very easy to obtain, and it's exotic. Vacationers with any level of income will feel comfortable. Tourists can find services with affordable prices. Exotic combination of natural beauty and tempting virgins. So a lot of the focus was placed on very young girls, very inexperienced girls, and that it was cheap. And then on the demand side, we see very obvious sexism. As you can read here, just one example. If you went to Pattaya with a wife or girlfriend, and you really want to try the exotic sex, do not despair. There's almost every step possible to rent a room for an hour or two if you wish. You can tell your wife that you went to explore, promising to return in a few hours. You'll get a girl for sex in like 15 minutes, and there will be plenty of time for fun. And some other things that I saw on the demand side in the discourse was a strict enforcement of gender roles. Men talked a lot about not wanting the kind of demanding and bossy women in the West and the kind of dissatisfaction with Western women and especially feminism, but a real draw to submissiveness of Southeast Asian women and a lot of paternalism, seeking Southeast Asian young women, and kind of racism and xenophobia portrayed in that as well. So a lot of crude comments, and there, in particular, were some more interviews done with men that were just very explicit and showing these results. And so there was one man named Ashley who was interviewed by the Village Daily, and he was talking about his experiences abroad. And a lot of these men described themselves as sexpats. And they said they have moved to Southeast Asian countries because of the abundance of sex, and said they would never intentionally live in a country without an abundance of cheap hookers. And this man described the women he was seeking out as LBFMs, and when asked, he described it as little brown effing machine. This is slang for a Southeast Asian woman that looks somewhere between 18 and 30 years old. Described in Thailand and the Philippines as a simple piece of lightweight equipment, normally 98 pounds, adaptable to every imaginable position, waterproof, bot-fed, rice-propelled. And when asked if he thought this term was racist, he said, anyone who thinks so is a round-eye feminazi. And so this is a perfect example of the racism, sexism, and xenophobia exhibited in the sex tourist discourse and in sex tourism in general, and especially this idea of being a sexpat and living here specifically for this. And so I was really intrigued by this interview and by the blatancy of these men, and I realized that he revealed in this interview that he had served in Vietnam and participated in the rest and recreation offered in Thailand for U.S. Armed Forces. And so one of the things that I ended up seeing in a lot of these websites was the influence of American military. And as I studied it more in research, I learned that during the Vietnam and Korean Wars, surrounding countries, including Thailand and the Philippines, hosted these R&R, rest and recreation services for men who were taking a break, and really contributed to not only Southeast Asian perception of prostitution, but really providing the supply for it in the past several decades. And then now just leaves behind the reputation that these countries have for being these sexual fantasy hotspots. And so a similar thing happened in Cambodia as a result of the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia peacekeeping mission following the Khmer Rouge. Really awful that these things are so correlated, but that was really the kind of mark that spiked their supply of prostitution as well. So there were a lot of things I expected to see that I ended up seeing very clearly, but some of the things in terms of military I think is really important to reflect on, because we need to know why this happens. Not enough focus has been placed on the demand exhibited so publicly by sex tourists. This can help target strategies for combating sexually exploitative travel. And when it comes to the insights given on the American military missions as well as the UN mission, it's important to understand the social consequences of our military presence abroad so that we make sure we never repeat it again.